So what we want to do now is make our notes catch up with what we've learned. Now, as I write something on the screen, what you'll need to do is copy that into your scientist notebook. Pause the video if you need more time, and then restart it when you're ready to go on. What I write, you write. Now, I'm using a different tool this time, and so my handwriting is pretty bad with this tool. I don't think it's really good for left-handed people, but just bear with me. So, we know now that photosynthesis is the process by which plants make their own food. And even that name, that word, photosynthesis, it actually makes sense when you think about what plants are actually doing. Photo means light, and then the word synthesis means to put together. So what plants are doing are putting together their own food using light. We also saw that plants basically have a list of things that they need to have in order for photosynthesis to take place, in order for them to produce or make their own food. And it's sort of like an ingredients list. So what we're going to do is write down those ingredients that we talked about, and then we're going to talk about the product, what it makes. Finally, we're going to write down that recipe or that chemical equation that we talked about for photosynthesis. So, on your page, write down the word ingredients. And then the first ingredient we said plants have to have is sunlight. Remember that plants use the energy from the sun to break apart and rearrange the rest of the ingredients in order to make their food, the sugar that they're making. Also, the plant needs to have water. And then finally, the plant needs to have carbon dioxide gas. Now, you may be thinking that plants also need chlorophyll, and they do. But remember that the chlorophyll is already present in the plant. It's not an outside ingredient that it needs to continue to obtain. The sun's always shining on it, so we say that it needs the sunlight, but the chlorophyll is already present in the plant. So a lot of times you won't see chlorophyll listed as one of the ingredients, but you know that that chlorophyll acts like the sunlight sponge that absorbs that energy and then uses it to break apart the water and carbon dioxide and rearrange them to make the sugar and the oxygen and the extra water. So sometimes you won't see chlorophyll listed in the ingredients list. It's kind of like a recipe. You know, when you read a recipe, say for a cake, as you read the ingredients, you might see things like flour or sugar or milk or eggs, but they usually don't list an oven because they assume that you already have the oven. And so that's why sometimes you don't see chlorophyll listed. Also, write down the chemical formula for these ingredients. H2O for water and CO2 for carbon dioxide. Now I'm going to write chlorophyll up here, and I'm also going to draw a leaf and shade it in green, because remember that chlorophyll is green, and that'll help us remember that color. Now, let's write down the product, or what photosynthesis makes. One of the things we know that it makes is sugar. And remember, we said that the sugar that it's making is a very specific one, glucose. Also, we talked about there are lots of different kinds of sugar, and glucose is the primary one that we're talking about. Now, the chemical formula for glucose is C6H12O6. Remember, that means that there are 6 atoms of carbon, 12 atoms of hydrogen, and 6 of oxygen in each molecule of glucose. And the plant makes that sugar, and then it stores it, and then uses it as it needs it. But remember that the plant also makes some oxygen. Now, some of the oxygen the plant uses, it uses it to help it break down that sugar. But the excess oxygen is released through those stoma, those opening in the leaves of the plant. And also, one of the byproducts of photosynthesis is water. The plant also makes some water in the process of making its food. A lot of the 5th grade textbooks don't list water because I guess they think, oh, that will confuse the 5th graders. They must not know 5th graders very well. And if the plant is running short on water, it will use that water, but if there's plenty of water already stored in the plant, then it will also release that water and water vapor through the stoma back into the air. You may have noticed that as you go through a forest, a lot of times you'll feel it's really damp because the plants, all those trees are releasing that water vapor back into the air. Now I'm going to put an asterisk right there beside the water to help me remember that they always list water. Oh, this is horrible.